And it's monitoring cross screens, measuring cross screens.
Measuring across screens. So audience measurement, cross-screen audience measurement.
So Brian, thanks for joining us at the 2013 CCA event, and thank you again for participating in our telecom analytics event. One of the more interesting trends now is measuring across multiple screens. Can you talk about some of the key trends you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so with the proliferation of devices, and particularly the proliferation of content, one of the big questions right now has been how do content providers and how do advertisers understand who's seeing their content and where to find those consumers. And so if you can just imagine the scenario where a typical day, all the screens that you look at, you probably look at your computer screen for a while, you look at your smartphone, you probably look at a tablet, you look at set-top box data, so television data. And so one of the big things that comScore has been working on, and has been doing now for a couple of years, really is cross-screen measurement. But it's really the integration of measuring content and audience across all those devices. So across your computer, across your smartphone, across your tablet, as well as set-top box data, so television viewing data as well. And consolidating all in one place, and then releasing that out to the market to say, okay, great, I want to understand how many incremental views I got on one of those platforms as opposed to just looking at the online space. Or from an advertiser's perspective, the same thing goes, which is help me understand my total reach across each of these platforms or in aggregate, as opposed to just looking at each of these individually, because of course there's an overlap across each one of those. So that's been one of the things, particularly from the comScore perspective, that I feel like from a leading edge component, we continue to kind of lead the charge on that perspective, and we've come out with a couple of significant releases on multi-platform measurement.
What are some of the anecdotal data points that you're seeing come out of that multi-screen experience?
Yeah, I think, one of the really interesting things is just to understand incremental reach associated with, or let me take a step back and say that usually the starting point is television. Television is the 800-pound gorilla in the advertising space. The other joke is, of course, no one got fired for buying more television. But if you were to shift everything over to mobile, for example, that's somewhat of a risky move. So one of the interesting things that we're really seeing is kind of the incremental reach and the incremental frequency associated with buying on those additional platforms. And I think one of the interesting things is just the true understanding that there is no cookie cutter answer to how much incremental reach and how much incremental audience you'll get. It is going to depend on the type of content and the type of audience that you're looking at. And so you can go ahead and hypothesize and say, gosh, if I imagine that I'm going to be going after a younger audience that may not spend as much time watching television as spending more time online, I'll get some incremental or much more reach in the digital realm, particularly in online and mobile, compared to an older audience. In some instances, that's absolutely true. There are other scenarios where that doesn't necessarily hold true.
So what does this data opportunity mean for a carrier? And then what challenges does that pose for a advertiser in terms of their spend, in terms of who they traditionally go to versus who they might have to go to in the future?
Yeah, so that's two really good questions. So from the carrier's perspective, one of the big questions is take one step back and say wireless carrier versus a carrier that provides across multiple components. So one of the big advantages of being a carrier in many instances is to provide that bundled package, right? Look at the quad play, right, where you're providing everything pretty much. And so here's an opportunity, if a carrier is providing a broad service of components, is to potentially be a provider of that information and to allow that type of measurement, particularly from a set-top box perspective, as well as from a wireless perspective, or even an online perspective, to provide that type of measurement. There are means by which comScore, for example, does measurement in all those areas that doesn't necessarily require a carrier to provide that information, but it certainly is helpful. Now, the benefit of the carrier providing something like that is it allows them to also, if that carrier is providing content or selling content, provides the opportunity for that carrier to go ahead and monetize that by saying, hey, according to a third party like comScore, here's our total reach of our content across each of these platforms, and you should go ahead and buy this content from us because we can prove out the incremental reach and the incremental effectiveness associated with that. One thing I would also say is, that's also one of the key pieces is not just the measurement, but is looking at the incremental effectiveness as well, which is another kind of component that comScore is on the leading edge, which is understanding the effectiveness of incremental reach on alternate channels as well. So from an advertiser buying that data, what that really means is I'm not getting some measurement from the company that is providing me with that channel. I'm getting it from a third party with a consistent methodology across all kinds of other channels as well. So I'm really looking at a kind of a market standard for that type of measurement.
Brian, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.